everybody, and welcome back to another video. My name is Lily, aka Lily Coy, and in the last couple of few videos that I was posting this week, they were kind of deep and kind of heavy, and I reference in a lot of my videos on mental well-being and emotional health that I went through a process of facing my demons, so to speak. And I usually mention it just like that, like other people mention it. Like, oh, you just face your demons. You just face your demons and you just do it, as if it's something that's simple or easy or comfortable. It's not. But it's kind of a hard process to explain, especially because with each and every person who's ever been courageous enough, honestly, to go through the process of really looking at themselves and looking at why they are the way that they are and why they feel the things that they do and act the way that they do. It's different for everyone. So, me telling you the step-by-step process that I went through, I mean, you can try to follow it, but it's not going to be real. If it's not unique to you, it's not actually effective. But nonetheless, I have gotten so many comments from people who are in tough places that are really similar to the places that I've been, and they're confused, just like I was, and they're trying to figure out how to even start the process of, facing your demons, and how do you know when you've done it. So I'm gonna do my best to share in this story time kind of what it felt like when I was going through it and what the process was like. But I'll start by saying that going through this process was one of the most challenging things I've ever done, partially because it was such a paradox. In many ways, it's like the easiest thing I've ever done, because it was just a matter of letting go and acknowledging the full scope of my feelings and who I am, and of just stopping the pretend. And so facing my demons was as easy as just being an unrestricted, unjudged, unregulated, complex, dynamic culmination of everything that I am and ever was. But this was also the most terrifying process I've ever gone through, because I believed that who I was, the culmination of my being, was unacceptable and undeserving of love. I believed that I couldn't be loved for who I was. I believed that things that I had done were not worthy of forgiveness. I knew that I was flawed, and I knew that I contained just a deep, visceral ugliness. And I knew that it was my life's job, my duty, to deny and cover up that ugliness at all costs. That was what I had to do if I had any hope of tricking someone into loving me, is what it felt like. And every time these feelings would come up, which was often, I would just feel sickened by shame, just absolutely sickened. And the idea of these parts of me being discovered was just terrifying. The idea of acknowledging that these parts existed and were genuinely part of me was not something I could do, because what I was so dedicated to was pretending that it wasn't true. And what I was so dedicated to over many years of my, positive self-development, I believed that I could improve myself to the point that these parts of me wouldn't exist anymore. As if scouring myself with healthy habits and false positivity and faking it till I make it would somehow scour out the stench of shame and just cover up all of the resentment and the anger and the grief with a nice powdering of beautiful whiteness, where everything just ends up with nice clean lines, like a minimalist's apartment. And I tried so hard to douse the fires of anger and resentment and regret with so much false positivity, thinking that all I needed was an affirming mantra and enough persistence that I would just be a different person. But it didn't work. None of that worked. And this ugliness that was inside of me, it kept coming through. And I kept making the same mistakes over and over again. I kept making the same mess. I tried and I failed so many times to be a different person. And the more that I put myself in different situations and different places with different kind of people, but ended up with pretty much the same result, the more scared I got. Because I really did start to realize that it was me, and that it didn't matter how much willpower I inflicted on myself, I couldn't change. I lost hope of being able to change myself, and it scared the absolute crap out of me. And the more scared that I got, the less I was able to control myself. I remember being so confused and thinking, why am I such a monster? Like, why do I hurt myself? Why do I sabotage myself? Why do I lash out at other people? Why do I say those things? Like, why won't these things just go away? Why won't they just stop? And why can't I just be different? And trying to read self-help book after self-help book, trying to figure out ways that I could cover it up, or ways that I could be, 21 days to a new habit, thinking that there was some trick or some technique that I could utilize to just like totally renovate who I was. But it didn't work, because there were forces inside of me, there were demons inside of me that were demanding to be acknowledged. But I thought that I couldn't. I thought that it was wrong and that it was bad, and that if I acknowledged these voices, these feelings in me, if I acknowledged them, then they would really be true. And if they were really true, then I would really be a bad person. And I would really, like, for sure, no questions asked, be completely unlovable. And so I refused to acknowledge them. I refused. And I tell you what, I did crazier and crazier stuff to avoid them. I drank, I smoked, I partied, I used substances, I used men, I relished codependency. I ate until I thought my stomach was gonna rupture. I puked until I bruised my eyeballs. I made myself run until I hoped my heart would stop. I studied yoga, I tried to meditate, I read Eckhart Tolle, I watched The Secret, I listened to Tony Robbins. Anything that would take me away from my thoughts, but these voices in me, these feelings, these demons, these constant thoughts that would come up, they just wouldn't leave me alone. It was like there was someone screaming in my head every single silent moment. And so I filled up that silence. I filled it up with the crazy until I was too exhausted and I was too hurt. I just couldn't sustain the constant running and the constant fear anymore. I just couldn't do it. I was so fed up with people and I was so fed up with myself that I just gave up. Like, I really gave up. I'd been fighting depression for a decade at that point. And I just stopped fighting, and I sank into it really deep. And the deeper I went with it, the more I got into the feelings that my depression was trying to cover up. Sinking through that depression, it took months. It was just months of me feeling pretty morose all the time. Nobody wanted to be around me anymore. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to be around anyone either, because they just would just spew false positivity at me, and I knew at that point that it just didn't work. And so it took me months of just sinking deeper and deeper to really start finding the feelings that were under there. Like I said, the feelings that my depression was trying to cover up, because hey, if you're not allowed to have feelings, a great thing to do is to just depress yourself to the point that you have no feelings, until you just become a blah, everything sucks human being. So I got to this point, and I was sad and exhausted and sick of trying, just like sick of trying to be a better person. And I got to this one night, I had binged on a bunch of food and I had purged, and I really wanted to do it again because I didn't know what else to do. And I was pacing around my dark apartment, and I was getting more and more mad. I kept thinking about Why am I like this? Why do I have to be depressed all the time? Why do I have to have all this ugliness inside me that I'm so scared for other people to see? Feeling so dejected and unloved and betrayed. And I was really, really scared that it would always be that way. And I grabbed a clipboard that I had. It was just like stacked with scrap paper. And because it was scrap paper, it wasn't like an official journal of mine that, is a representation of who I am. Because it was just scrap paper, I guess I felt more allowed to write the things that were in my head. And I started writing, and so much hate came out. It was just hateful, hateful things. And instead of trying to redirect that, I just let it go. And in that moment, I decided that I was gonna honor the hate that I felt in my heart, because it was there for a good reason. It was there because it was put there. And I was sick of holding that burden by myself. And so I kept going, and when I felt guilty about having these, hateful feelings, or when I, heard the voices of all of the gurus around the world that say that, oh, just keeping hate in your heart hurts no one but you. You should, just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. I tried what they suggested. It didn't work. Anyway, every time I felt something like that, I said, no, I'm not denying this for one more minute of my life. It's there, and it's part of me, and I'm sick of orphaning half of myself just because it was hurt. And with the hate came anger. And when I say anger, I don't know if that's a good enough word, because it's like I get angry when someone cuts me off in traffic. I was enraged by everything. And instead of trying to, step back and be really logical and be like, okay, well, Lily, yeah, sure, people did things to you, but, you also were in that situation, and, maybe you escalated things, and it wasn't like you participated. There's a time and a place for that. This was not that time. And so I let all that rationalizing go. I let go of as much as I could. I just got more and more mad, and I remember, this scrap paper, I had started writing, and it was like legible and stuff, and it just got to a point where I was just scribbling with the frickin' pen and shredding the pages with just so much I hate you for what you did to me. I fuck hate you. And I broke the pen, so I had to get another pen. And after rage, of course, comes shame. So much shame over who I was, and then which took me right back to the anger about why I did those things that I was ashamed of in the first place, which ferried in the regret and sadness and just the dreams that I had had throughout my life that were innocent and good hopes for myself that had just been destroyed by other people. I hate them for it. And as I kept going through this process, I noticed that, I was feeling so much fear. I feel like I lived in fear, fear that I would always be this person, fear that no one would ever love me, fear that I would be by myself, fear that I would hurt people without meaning to, fear that I couldn't control myself, fear that everything that my mom said about me was true. But as more and more of that came up, as I looked at my fears of the inevitable failure, that I felt like I was just destined to not be good enough. I was destined to come up short. And because of that, I felt like I was destined to this inevitable misery. And with everything coming up, it wasn't linear. It wasn't like first you felt the anger, and then you felt a little scared, and then, no, it was like all at once. Anger, fear, sadness. I was in my apartment, and I was screaming, like guttural screaming. I screamed into a pillow just, because I was not in a place to be dealing with cops. So I didn't want my neighbors to call the cops. Probably would have gotten carted off to a mental institution. Anyway, I was just emptying my lungs into bedding over and over again, and I thought the blood vessels in my freaking throat were gonna rupture. And I was fine with that. And every muscle in my body was just heaving out all of this pain. And while in objective reality, all of my bodily fluids were staying inside of me. It felt like I was just pouring out this black tar that had felt like it had been inside of me my whole life. And it had been making me so sick. And this was like dead winter. And I was dealing with hypothyroid stuff still. I was a naturally very cold person. Like, I was always cold. It is very rare that I could get warm enough. But I remember during this process, I just started burning up. There could have been steam coming off of my body for all I know. But it was the first time that I had felt hot in so long. And it was the first time in a long time that, despite so much purging, both literally and metaphorically, I actually felt full for the first time. I felt full of myself. And I started to feel what I guess I can only describe as like some sense of peace. And I remember having the thought, like the very distinct thought, that this is me now. This anger, this explosive anger, this is me. This is who I'm gonna be now and forever. And I remember a very strong part of me saying, good, yes, be this. Because this is so much better than the weak, despondent, repressed little thing that you were trying to be. And then I got mad again, and I broke stuff, and I writhed on the floor, and I yelled, and I cursed everyone, probably including you. It was just what I was doing in the moment. I cursed everyone who had ever shown me even a shred of meanness. I cursed their carelessness. I cursed every single person who had turned away from me when I was in pain. I cursed all of those awful happy people for just existing. I hated them all for it. I hated them all. And in that moment, I felt really okay about it. And I don't remember how or when or where I fell asleep, but I do remember waking up the next morning, and I remember walking outside because I was taking care of my dad's dog, bless his little heart. I remember walking outside and just the world looked different, felt different, and I felt different. I felt empowered, and I felt mad still. I was mad, but it was a different kind of mad. Like there wasn't an urgency behind it, and I felt really at peace with that. I felt really at peace with who I was. And I think that was one of the first times that I was able to say to myself, it honestly doesn't matter if anyone else ever loves you, because I see you and I love you, and beyond that, nothing matters. And I tell you what, in all of my years of experience and relationships, both good and bad, I can tell you right now that being seen and accepted and understood by yourself is more potent and meaningful than anything someone else can give you. No one can love you like you can love you. And after that evening, it wasn't a huge, dramatic, sudden change, but it was from that day forward. I got so much better at being me, at expressing myself without worrying about whether or not someone else would accept it. I stopped worrying so much about being by myself for the rest of my life. I didn't worry so much about being a failure because I knew that it didn't matter so much, all of these subjective ideas of what failure is. It just mattered to me. I stopped worrying about being angry about bad things that had been done to me. I stopped worrying about being angry about the bad things that humanity did to the planet. In fact, I learned a whole other word for it. It's called moral indignation. It's one of my favorite phrases. And I learned that all of those demons that were inside of me that I was so scared of, they're nothing bad. They're nothing bad. They can't hurt you. They can't hurt you as much as you repressing them hurts you. Over the years, I learned that appropriately expressed anger is nowhere near as toxic as explosive repressed anger. I learned that boundaries exist, and I learned that it's my job to take care of and protect myself. And over the years, I have learned that you don't face your demons once and they're gone. I learned that you face them and they are forever and always a part of you, in good ways and not so good ways, and that you can use their strengths to your benefit. They will keep coming up in negative ways if you ignore them. But if you listen to the wisdom that they have to offer you, there's a lot to learn. And I've learned that the sweetest form of human connection is the kind between two people who can see each other because they can see themselves. And I'll just say that I would love to sit here and say that I'm this emotionally evolved person who just doesn't get caught up in fear or shame or anger or perfectionism or thinking, why not me, God? I do. I do. But every time I have to rub up against one of these feelings, I get a little bit less scared of it, and I'm a little bit more confident of its impermanence. Like I said a couple videos ago, you know, anxiety, fear, shame, grief, resentment, anger. Every time I see them, it's like bumping into my pet spider who lives in the bathroom. There's like that visceral gut reaction where I'm like, ah, spider, ah, anger, fear, resentment. But then I'm like, oh, it's just George. It's just George. He's fine. He actually eats my mosquitoes. My blood-sucking mosquitoes. Gosh, that's an interesting metaphor, isn't it? So, the months in my life I spent going through this process, and that one quite explosive evening, you know, they weren't the beginning or the end of the journey, but they were definitely a very catalyzing part of my life. And I'm so grateful that I was worn down enough, or fed up enough, or angry enough, or just like broken open enough to have been able to get to that place in my life of really looking at myself and deciding to love me anyway. So I hope this story time video has maybe just got you thinking in a new or different or deeper way, or not. And I wish you all the best during the process that you're going through, whatever that may be, or whatever it is you are trying to heal from, or forgive, or forget, or repress, or ignore with bullshit positivity. I'd say I hope it's easy and like doesn't hurt that bad, because I definitely don't wish this kind of like emotional pain on anyone. But you know, those moments of really feeling that pain were some of the realest of my life, and it was definitely the closest I've ever gotten to myself, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. So I send you love as you go through what you have to go through. And as always, make better choices for yourself. No one's gonna do it for you. And take really, really, really good care. I'll see you all very soon. Bye. That's pretty. That's really good. Whew. It's time to bring out my snot pillowcase. I think anyone who's processed like a significant amount of emotional trauma has discovered that it's just way too expensive and impractical to use tissues. You just gotta let go and get a snot rag.